You sure you're in the right place, old-timer? The voice came from a corner booth, young, cocky, and sharpened by the confidence of someone who'd mastered something dangerous. It sliced through the low hum of the bar, the clatter of glasses, and the muted sports commentary drifting from the TV. Gordon Hughes, 81, didn't bother to look up. His eyes stayed on the deep amber swirl of whiskey in his glass, watching a bead of condensation slide lazily down the side. His hands, veined, weathered, and marked by time, held the tumbler steady. A slight limp betrayed an old injury that never quite healed, and a small hearing aid rested discreetly in his right ear. To everyone else, he was just another tired old man sipping his drink alone at the end of a quiet evening in an unremarkable bar. The young man who had spoken, lean, taut with muscle beneath a plain gray t-shirt, mistook Gordon's silence for weakness. He took it as an invitation to push further. He and his 4 companions had claimed a nearby booth, their restless energy too big for the quiet little bar. All of them were in their late 20s or early 30s with close-cropped hair, trimmed beards, and alert eyes, the kind that told you they weren't ordinary civilians. They were off-duty, dressed down in jeans and casual shirts, but everything about them, their posture, their presence, the way they watched the room, carried the unmistakable mark of elite soldiers. Delta Force operators. No insignia, no bragging rights, but it was obvious in the way they moved. "I'm serious," the young man said, sliding onto the stool beside Gordon. His name was Jake. "This isn't exactly the VFW. You sure you're not lost, old-timer?" Gordon turned his head for the first time, meeting Jake's gaze with pale blue eyes that had seen more than their share of both sunlight and shadow. The look was calm, detached, ancient. "Just having a drink," he said simply. From their booth, Jake's friends laughed quietly. Their leader was bored, buzzed, and had found himself an easy target. Jake's smirk deepened as his eyes caught on Gordon's jacket, draped over the back of his stool. It was an old, faded field jacket, the kind you'd find at a surplus store. A frayed patch clung to the sleeve, its design barely visible, some kind of skull or winged shape, too worn to tell. Jake pointed at it. "What's that supposed to be? You get that at a flea market? Trying to impress someone?" Gordon's expression didn't change. He calmly reached over and drew the jacket closer. "Just an old patch," he said quietly. "Wrong answer. To men like Jake, men who'd fought and bled for their own unit insignias, pretending to wear one was an insult beyond measure. Stolen valor, even hinted at, was a spark in dry tinder. The air shifted, hardening around them. Jake's smirk faded. "An old patch?" he repeated, his voice low now. "What unit?" "It was a long time ago," Gordon replied, turning back to his drink. He hoped it would end there. He never came to this bar for conversation. Just peace, the smell of old wood, the hum of quiet evenings, anonymity. But men like Jake didn't let things go. They were trained to dig, to push, to find weakness. Gordon's evasiveness was like blood in the water. One of the others, a broad man named Coyle, left the booth and came to stand on Jake's other side. "He doesn't want to talk about it, Jake," Coyle said with a grin. "Maybe it's classified." The sarcasm dripped. Jake leaned in, voice dropping. "What are you, old man? Part of some secret squirrel outfit? Tell us a war story. We're all friends here." Behind the bar, Maria, the owner for over 20 years, watched, unease tightening her chest. Gordon had been coming in for nearly a decade. Same stool, same whiskey, never bothering anyone. She knew he was a veteran, though he'd never said a word about it. She also knew the look in Jake's eyes, the dangerous mix of pride, trauma, and restless aggression that came home from war zones. It was the kind of energy that could turn lethal without warning. Jake's gaze fell again on the faded combat infantry badge above the jacket pocket. He noticed how Gordon sat, not just still, but balanced. That wasn't frailty. It was economy of movement, discipline. The soldier in him recognized it, but whiskey and ego drowned the realization. "Look," Jake said finally, his voice rising, frustration flaring. "I'm not asking for classified intel, but men I know, better men, died for the patches they wore. So when I see some old-timer in a bar sporting one he can't name, it pisses me off. So I'll ask again, what unit?" The rest of his team stood now, forming a half circle around the old man. The room went still. Conversations faltered. Every eye was on them. Gordon studied the faces around him. Young, proud, certain. Lions in their prime. He exhaled slowly, a sound like a door closing. "It doesn't matter anymore," he said softly. Jake scoffed. "That's what they all say." He jabbed a finger at the old patch. "This thing's a joke." His fingertip brushed the worn fabric, and in that instant, Gordon's world shifted. The bar vanished. The smell of whiskey and wood gave way to burning metal and blood. The hum of the air conditioner became the deafening thump of rotor blades slicing the black Afghan sky. He was 25 again, crammed into the back of a Blackhawk slick with blood and dust. A grinning teammate slapped a brand-new patch on his shoulder, the same design, crisp and dark under red cabin light. A skull staring back at him, promising what they were about to become. The vision vanished in a heartbeat, leaving only the taste of ash. Gordon blinked. The bar returned. Jake still stood there, hand on the jacket, that same smug expression frozen on his face. Maria had seen enough. She set down her bar rag and walked briskly to the office. The patrons assumed she was calling the police. Some even looked relieved. But Maria wasn't dialing 911. She knew the local cops couldn't handle this. From a drawer, she pulled out a small laminated card, a single number written in black marker. A retired general had given it to her years ago. "If Gordon ever gets in trouble, the kind only soldiers understand, call this number. Don't ask questions." Her hands trembled as she dialed. 2 rings. "Operations Center," came a clipped professional voice. "My name is Maria," she said, steadying herself. "I'm calling about a man named Gordon Hughes." She explained quickly, the aggressive younger men, the confrontation, the danger simmering in her bar. There was typing, then silence. 10 long seconds. When the voice returned, it was changed, urgent, almost fearful. "Ma'am," the officer said, low and intense. "Keep them there. Do not let them leave. Help is on the way." Inside a windowless room at the Joint Special Operations Command, Sergeant Miller stared at his monitor, the color draining from his face. The name Gordon Hughes had triggered clearance levels he'd never even known existed. The screen filled with redacted text. Just fragments remained visible. Project Titan, Operation Nightshade, the Scythe of Kandahar. At the top, a warning glowed in crimson. Incident of contact requires immediate notification to 06 or higher. Do not engage. Do not detain. Miller's hands shook as he picked up the secure line to his commanding officer. He didn't care it was nearly 2200 hours. The system was screaming. The name he was seeing wasn't just classified, it was legend. And now, according to a frightened bartender, a group of hot-headed Delta operators were harassing that legend in a North Carolina dive bar. This was bad. Very, very bad. Back in the bar, Jake had no idea the hornet's nest he'd kicked. He mistook Gordon's silence for surrender. He gripped the old man's arm. "All right, that's it," he said loudly. "You and me, we're taking a walk. Let's see what the MPs think of your stories." He started pulling Gordon off the stool. The old man didn't fight, but a flicker, ancient and dangerous, lit behind his eyes. Maria, returning from the office, cried out, "Leave him alone!" But Jake didn't hear her. He was too far gone, and he'd just crossed a line he would never uncross. A triumphant smirk tugged at Jake's face. In his mind, this was justice. He was defending the honor of his brothers. But before his satisfaction could settle, the bar's front door slammed open so hard the small bell above it rang wildly. A cool rush of night air swept in, silencing the room. Outside, 3 black SUVs had glided to a stop without sirens or flashing lights, their arrival eerily quiet. 6 men stepped out. They weren't in uniform, but their sharp, deliberate movements radiated authority. They entered the bar with silent precision, scanning the room once before their attention locked on the scene at the counter. At their head stood a tall man with graying hair and a face of chiseled resolve. His clear, cold eyes fixed on Jake's hand gripping Gordon's arm. Colonel David Williams, commander of Jake's own unit. His presence seemed to drain the oxygen from the room. The recognition hit instantly. Jake and his team went pale, their bodies snapping rigid as if they'd been struck by lightning. The smug defiance drained from Jake's face, replaced by a look of dawning horror. He released Gordon's arm like it had burned him. Colonel Williams ignored his men completely. His gaze stayed on Gordon Hughes. Each step he took toward the bar was measured, silent, deliberate. When he stopped 3 feet away, the bar was so quiet that even the hum of the beer cooler sounded deafening. Then the impossible happened. The colonel straightened to full attention, his posture flawless, and raised his right hand in a crisp salute that sliced through the air. "Mr. Hughes," he said, his tone calm, resonant, and filled with respect. "Colonel David Williams. It's an honor, sir." A triumphant smirk tugged at Jake's face. In his mind, this was justice. He was defending the honor of his brothers. But before his satisfaction could settle, the bar's front door slammed open so hard the small bell above it rang wildly. A cool rush of night air swept in, silencing the room. Outside, 3 black SUVs had glided to a stop without sirens or flashing lights, their arrival eerily quiet. 6 men stepped out. They weren't in uniform, but their sharp, deliberate movements radiated authority. They entered the bar with silent precision, scanning the room once before their attention locked on the scene at the counter. At their head stood a tall man with graying hair and a face of chiseled resolve, his clear, cold eyes fixed on Jake's hand gripping Gordon's arm. Colonel David Williams, commander of Jake's own unit. His presence seemed to drain the oxygen from the room. The recognition hit instantly. Jake and his team went pale, their bodies snapping rigid as if they'd been struck by lightning. The smug defiance drained from Jake's face, replaced by a look of dawning horror. He released Gordon's arm like it had burned him. Colonel Williams ignored his men completely. His gaze stayed on Gordon Hughes. Each step he took toward the bar was measured, silent, deliberate. When he stopped 3 feet away, the bar was so quiet that even the hum of the beer cooler sounded deafening. Then the impossible happened. The colonel straightened to full attention, his posture flawless, and raised his right hand in a crisp salute that sliced through the air. "Mr. Hughes," he said, his tone calm, resonant, and filled with respect. "Colonel David Williams. It's an honor, sir."